In the meantime, I always have some rants about science and pop culture. So tonight is about the Fast and the Furious. Who all watches the Fast and the Furious every time? Oh my god. Well, luckily there's clips for those of you who don't or those of you who are lying. They're amazing, honestly, and they can make an expert out of any of you, right? So like I'm into biology. My friend who's a physicist and I did a podcast where we rewatched all the Fast and Furious movies and talked about the science. And we interviewed medical experts. Someone from NASA even came on the show. Maria was our car culture expert. So that's how I met her. I literally just emailed the automotive museum being like, is someone there willing to talk to me about Fast and the Furious? So we have a whole podcast about it. It's called The Facts and the Furious, because I only thought about the Facts and the Furious a year later. If you think about it, all of these STEM topics are covered in the Fast and the Furious. And if you're an armchair expert about anything, at some point if you watch these movies, they're so ridiculous that you will pause and be like, I don't think that's how that works. But they're so great, it's okay. Okay, so first off, we are going to start with some questions. My main concern is about Dominic Toretto, and is he somewhere on the spectrum? Because he is insane when it comes to his math abilities. And so this is one of the many ridiculous scenes in the movies. And I do have some clips, but this one I'm just going to kind of describe to you. So there's an oil tanker. They're stealing gas, I think, at this point in the movies. They're all started with DVD players. It's basically Point Break, but with cars. So for those of you who haven't seen it, that's the first one, pretty quaint. But at this point, this gas tanker is rolling down a hill on fire, and of course there's like huge rocks on either side, so you can't just go around it. But think about what all goes into his calculations, because of course this car in the end ducks right under it, right? Drives an exact moment to get under it. What is the slope of this road? Are there any potholes? I know Dominic knows exactly how tall his car is, how it handles, how it accelerates. So yeah, sure. But how much gas was in this thing to begin with? What rate is it burning off? Right? All of these things go into timing it just right. So the man is basically a superhero, or maybe physics doesn't work quite the same on his Earth. It's like Earth 616 and we're on Earth 1. I don't know. But things to think about. Because they get it right every time. And they also almost never get injured. One guy once bumps his elbow in movie 2, and then I think that's it for injuries. I think there's a nosebleed or 2 maybe also. All right. This is our first clip. And maybe the most ridiculous stuff of all time. I just want you to think about this, sort of realistically. Maybe raise your hand or give a little chuckle when you think of something that happens that's maybe not super realistic, and then we'll talk about it afterwards.
Here you go. And the happy ending.
We've got a character right there. Driving on a divided highway that's also a bridge. The tank is dragging a car as a counterweight, so that's got to hit the structure at an exact moment. Dominic turns it, he's like standing on his car, turns at the exact moment. And honestly, all of that's fine. What gets me is the two of them leaping through the air, and then when he collects her, they go just on his trajectory, right? There's no change in trajectory based on acquiring one Michelle Rodriguez. The other thing, and the big question here is, just how hard is Dominic Toretto? Because as our medical expert pointed out, if you fall onto a car windshield at that speed, you're not fine. And the person on top of you is also not fine, right? So he's soft enough for her to land on, but hard enough for him to just break the windshield and then just be able to roll over and be like, hey girl. She's a lucky lady, I guess. Dominic is as hard and as soft as anyone could want him to be. So yeah. I love these movies. Okay. All right, question in a second. Can cars fly? Any thoughts? Any thoughts? Well, Maria talked about this a little bit in hers, right? You don't want them to necessarily. So we're going to watch the clip here in a second. But for plot reasons, in movie 7, they're in Dubai, and this nice car has some chip in it, I forget exactly, and it's up in one of these towers in Dubai. And they have to drive, the only logical way to get this chip is to drive the car out of the building, into the next building over. And I want you to keep an eye out for Jason Statham's role in all of this, because in movie 7 he's a bad guy. That changes. Family. Comes part of the family eventually. But in this one he's a bad guy. I want you to watch for his role in this, and then we'll talk about it afterwards. So the grenade helps. By the way, there's 3 towers, so this scene isn't over yet. Because you can't stop all that quickly, which is, an actual use of physics. So I don't know if you really noticed, but the grenade actually helps, right? So they were falling, because that's what cars do. They don't fly, they fall. But when Jason Statham shoots them with a grenade, what it does, it goes off behind and slightly below them, and just Sure, honestly, it's fine. So, we're going to talk a little bit more about cars flying. Later in the same movie, in Furious 7, it's actually Plan A. This is Plan A. The first one was Plan B. They do it again. So the only way to get onto this very secluded road to like a facility of some sort is to drop out of the plane. That's the only way. There's no other way. Don't ask. Shh. So, my favorite part of this scene, and you'll see on the way when I show you the clip, is Roman, who's played by Tyrese, using the brake pedal as if it does anything while a car is going through the air. And the other thing I want you guys to think about while you're watching this is, so I'm going to give you a little spoiler. No, cars can't fly. They did this stunt practically. So 3 different cars of every one of these types was used. And so I wanted to see if you can figure out when it went from 1 to 2 to 3. Oh yeah, they're in the cars the whole time, I forgot to tell Honestly, these movies are amazing anyway. So, did anyone notice when it went from car 1 to car 2 to car 3? Okay, so car 1, if you drop one out of a plane, that's it, you're done. Right? That lands wherever gravity and the wind dictate. So they did this practically over some desert, one hopes, and they had people out there with cameras on, right, along with these cars. The cinematography in this movie, honestly, in 7 is amazing. So they did this practically. Those cars did not land on their wheels and then bounce and then drive away. They were done. So they had a second version in every one of those cars, and that's the one you see when they release about 20 feet off the ground from the parachute. Reinforced suspensions and all that, so it would at least not immediately, demolish it, but still not drivable. And then the third one is what you see when it goes, drives up. So it's just amazing to me, and if you ever are bored or just, later tonight, YouTube has a whole lot of these behind-the-scenes videos, and they're pretty amazing because they put a lot of time and thought, and it's just really cool to see skydiving cars. Okay. What am I forget what this is? Alright, let's just watch this because I can't remember where I am. Oh, yeah. fucking murder. According to Bert Hapley here, 0. Because in movie 5, they stop killing people, and they keep having news people tell us that there's been no casualties. So Bert fucking Hapley here, because this is really the same actor, is here. It's like the report is, oh, luckily no casualties, but one guy is missing because Dominic Toretto is on that. No. We interviewed an emergency room doctor who called this, I believe, the rock tumbler of arms and legs. If you imagine, and they show it earlier in the movie, the prisoners are all chained, right, by their wrists and their ankles. So a crash like that, yeah, rock tumbler of arms and legs. Not great. There's lots more. I didn't put a clip of this, but this is my absolute favorite stunt in all of the movies. This is the bank vault scene in Rio. So for those of you who have seen it, basically there's 2 cars here. They pull this vault out because it's full of cash, and they drive it for miles and miles through the streets of Rio de Janeiro. It's tumbling through Starbucks and, knocking into cars or whatever. But there's a news report later that says, oh, don't worry, no casualties. Bullshit. The funny thing about this is if you can see these guide wires here, this is the only VFX in this entire scene. So that's the only thing that they added in with computers later, because what would fail is these winches behind the cars, the hooks, and these guide wires. Absolutely no way that they would pull a bank vault through the streets of Rio de Janeiro, so they had to put those in later, and what they did was they put a truck inside of the bank vault. So they sawed off a pickup truck and built a bank vault around it and drove it around behind the 2 cars for the whole sequence of it. And so it's, again, all done practically. Which is, I don't know, makes it sort of more fun to know how they did it, just to show how fucking unrealistic these movies are. Yeah, okay, but so they killed multiple people in Rio de Janeiro, that's all covered up. At some point I want to do a Charlie Day's, murder board conspiracy theory thing about just how many people these people killed, but I haven't gotten to that yet. Next time someone calls out the flu, I'll put that together. So they make up for that maybe in Rome. This is in Fast X. But this kill count counts against Jason Momoa, who's basically a Bond villain in this movie, and you should see it, it's amazing. Okay, so the only math that I could notice being done in all of the movies comes in the most recent one, in Fast X, where they talk about how much smaller this explosion was. By the way, this is like a bomb that's like, Melissa diameter, rolling on fire through the streets of Rome, all downhill, into the water here. And they divert it into the water here because water is denser than air and it will stifle some of the explosion. So that's the only time I've ever heard them doing any sort of calculations. And they were right, less people would be killed, but there's also the news report just after this saying, don't worry, no one was killed in Rome today. Bullshit. Because not only just this explosion, but also it rolled down the streets of Rome for miles and miles on fire. But again, it counts against Jason Momoa. Really, the family actually saved lots of people with math. All right. This is my presentation, but I literally always forget that they went to space in movie 9. Okay, you guys, seriously, this franchise started off with DVD fests. And in movie 9, they go to space. Roman and Tej fucking go to space. And Bobak Ferdowsi, who you might know as the Mohawk guy from NASA, agreed to take my call and answer questions about the Fast and the Furious because he's also a fan and had thought about whether or not you could launch a Pontiac Fiero into space. The movie is surprisingly accurate. What he called it was the LaCroix of science. It was like there was a poster of a launch outside the writer's room that like maybe they had seen. So you can see a little bit here, and don't worry, we're gonna watch a clip. They launched it from an airplane, which we did used to do. There's boosters, there's rockets, there's things that get jettisoned off, so watch for all of those. So again, they had seen a launch into space when they decided to do this. So let's just, enjoy this. They're very serious, by the way. Literally, even halfway through the movie, right? Because it's cutting between this and like some fucking other thing going on. I forget that they go to space. And then we'll cut back to the scene. I'm like, oh, yeah, that's right. We're in space. So again, this looks, all along. So we're gonna go to the second part of this clip here. I think is next. Nope. All right. So what we don't see, because I didn't put the right clip in, is that Roman again is using the steering wheel. He's using the brake pedal and things like that. And to me, that seemed ridiculous. Just as ridiculous as when he's falling out of the parachuted plane. But it turns out Bob Eck was like, actually, if you're going to launch a person who's a driver and not an astronaut or an Air Force pilot into space, it's relatively easy to rig up these things, right? Like, the pedal connects to something, sure, you can make that, the thruster of your Pontiac Fiero spacecraft. And you would be safer to do that, right? You can't teach someone, toggles as quickly as you can rig up, a steering wheel to work under these conditions. So I thought that was delightful. I would like being wrong about stuff. That's part of this too. Okay, so yeah, go to space. The real question that I hadn't even considered until we were talking to a physicist and a NASA engineer was how the fuck do you get back? Because Roman and Tej are there having Coronas at the family barbecue at the end of this movie. And that's not nearly as straightforward. That's the biggest question. How do you get from out there to in here? The ISS has a docking port. It's not set up for Pontiac Fieros or for random people out in space. And then once they are aboard, what do they do there? Right? We found out a little bit about this in the meantime. The Starliner astronauts who ended up there for extra months and months. They bump someone from the next launch. They send up a different spacecraft to get them. They did just save the world, if I forgot to mention that. Some computer virus, I think. I can't even say. But they don't show. Basically, they go from this scene to them at the barbecue, so we just sort of gloss over that. But I didn't even notice. They did a good job. They fooled me. Okay, real quick. How do magnets work? This is a box truck that has a giant electromagnet in it. There's a dial that's like, ooh, bring things toward me versus, ooh, bring things away. So that's, sort of an interesting version of this. I'm just making sure I'm not wildly off time here. We're doing good. So you see your cell phones, your bicycles, keys, things like that. What the physicist pointed out to me was that you don't see any underwire bras on here. And you would. Because if it's that strong, you'd be pulling washing machines and things like that out of stores. You would see a lot of that. Every glucose monitor and pacemaker in Edinburgh is on the fritz. Again, so people died here. Later in the same movie, these cars in front are the ones that have the electromagnets in them, these Dodge Chargers or the like. But all the cars are hitting the bad guy's vehicle with John Cena inside in the background. There's a bad guy in this movie, but not in the next movie. Families. And it's just interesting to me that at some point you can make your magnets work about 20 feet behind you if needed. But again, they did this whole thing practically. They closed this street. All of these cars that were parked here were on guide wires and just flung one after another into this back vehicle. And then all they did in the VFX here is remove the guide wires instead of add them. So it's a fun one to watch. Okay, last but not least, this is the literal cliffhanger of Fast X, which I did not know ended in a cliffhanger, and now I still have to wait, I think, 2 more years to see Fast 11. A dam is just a vertical road. I mean, am I right? Of course Don can drive this. Despite it looking exactly like the Hot Wheels track I had as a child. It is... Alright, quick setup. Again, I mentioned Jason Momoa is basically a Bond villain. He's gonna kill Dom, but not with like a bullet or something simple like that. He's gonna trap him on a dam and have a gas tanker on either side crash into him. Don't worry about it. So what Dom does, of course, is drive the long way off the dam, not into like the nice lake that's 20 feet behind him, but off the long way to get away from it. So the gas tankers crash into each other, of course, spilling liquid gas all down the dam. Here's his car up front here. So never mind the calculation of leaping off a cliff and somehow ending back up on, right? Like, your car's got to be weighted in a certain way that you can get back on it so you can drive on the dam. Liquid gas is on fire, is falling behind you. The whole time he's got a 7-year-old kid in the car, so that's a real consideration. And explosion really isn't enough, and he pushes the Nas button, which is not the right time for that, but of course is the reason he gets away. But we're left with a cliffhanger because the dam isn't in such good shape after all of this happens, and it's maybe cracking, and we don't know what's going to happen, and I'm a little bit worried. So yeah, that's basically the Fast and the Furious. One last little clip here. I love Tej.
Bro, it means numbers don't lie.
Numbers don't
As
lie.
long as we obey the laws of physics, we'll be fine, okay? It's just all math and science. You should listen to a teacher.
So there you go. Listen to your teachers. Everything is math and science. Thank you, Tej. My conclusion is still that they do not live on the same planet Earth that we live in. The laws of physics work differently, but draw your own conclusions. As I put up earlier, there's so many STEM topics and fields you can talk about with the Fast and the Furious movies. I highly recommend a rewatch with your family. Be annoying like me and pause it from time to time just to give people fun facts. It goes over real well. A little bit, yeah. So I have a podcast about Star Wars and science, Star Warsologies. Check out Fast and the Furious, which was the one we did about Fast and the Furious. Thinking about doing a rewatch again when the next movie comes out called Too Facts, Too Curious. So, yeah, stay tuned. And thanks for coming out. All right, questions?
Hi, thank you. In your professional opinion, how intentional do you think this movie franchise is targeting two audiences? Those that will eat up any kind of action movie slop, and those who know it's ridiculous and love it for how ridiculous it is because it's breaking all these rules of science?
It's a good question. I've long wondered, because there are movies that you wouldn't expect that hire science advisors, right, that talk to actual academics and experts in their field. I have found no evidence that the Fast and the Furious does such a thing, but I am legitimately trying to find out. I mean, the whole part of the equation we didn't talk about here is the family aspect, right? It is a great action movie. There's always ridiculous stuff and scenes, but they at least spend a little time, you know, with the character aspect of it. I mean, they know they're ridiculous. They're competing with themselves, right? Because, like I said, the first movie is basically just Point Break, and now we're in space. So, like, but I would love, if I had 5 minutes with any celebrity, it would probably, I would want it to be with Vin Diesel. I'd just be like, how self-aware is he? Like, I'm not sure. I'll keep going. Any other questions?
It might be the same question.
Oh, okay.
But the suspension of disbelief for this chain seems different than other movies.
Oh, yeah,
For
yeah.
you as a fan, like,
Right.
what's
No,
up
it's
with
true.
that?
That's a good point, because I actually, when I see the Mission Impossible movies, I actually think of them as sort of the same branch, like following the same path, right? If you go back and you watch the first Mission Impossible, it's pretty chill, right? It's just like kind of a regular spy movie. And now, Tom Cruise, it's gotta be like, what did Tom Cruise do for real? And like all of those things. But I don't love the Mission Impossible movies. I see them in theaters, they're a spectacle or whatever, but Fast and the Furious, I will nerd out about. So you're right. I don't know. It's a good question. Do you have any thoughts? Do you have any ideas? I don't know how they did it, but they got me. Some of it's just, friends I had that were super into it. And, some of it I blame my husband for because he puts up with me pausing and being like, let's just check the physics on that real quick. But like I said, I think it could make an extra anyone. Like, I think no matter what you do, you could pause this movie and be like, wait, actually, I know something about this, right? And that is why we talk to a different expert every episode, right? We talk to Maria about, like, the car culture of parts of it, which we didn't even touch on, right? And every one, they go to, like, some sort of car, a drag race or a fuel festival or, like, something like that. That's a whole aspect of it. And they seem to get it somewhat right. So you can recognize things, So I think anyone who did anything, would see themselves in this. I don't know, it's just one of those things where it seems like an expanded universe, even though they didn't intend it to be. But yeah, if you figure out why I love it so much, by all means, tell my therapist. Any other questions?
I wanted to ask, do you know how many cars were destroyed across all the movies? And how much did it cost? And did they budget that out?
Right, I do not know the answer to that, but now I want to. Right, because that would be another thing, right? So one of the people we talked to was a stunt driver, And so he could tell when things were being driven by humans versus when they were, VFX versus when they were like on rigs or something like that. Like he can identify that with his expertise. And he's the one who told me about the different, it takes this many versions of this car. So you have to go through it with someone like that to be able to quantify that. Or, maybe that's a Freedom of Information Act. We can sort of get on the budgets of these movies.
Yeah,
It's worth it every penny.
I also wanted to ask, did they actually launch a car out of a plane for one of their stunts? Like that picture?
That first one, yeah. So the one where they end up parachuting or whatever.
The parachute was like a picture with a camera, and then there was like someone doing the plane.
Yes. So the cameramen had head-mounted cameras, and they were skydiving. So they jumped out of the plane first, and then yes, they absolutely dropped those cars, not with people in them.
Right.
Dropped those cars after them, and all of those were real shots.
And those cars probably got...
Those cars were, demolished as soon as they hit the ground. And that's why I was thinking, they probably did this over some Utah desert or, something like that somewhere. Because you can't just do that anywhere.
All right, thank you.
I've got one more question, and this is probably a really hard question to answer. I'm not sure if anybody knows. So human creativity is amazing, right? In these movies, they kind of go way beyond kind of imagination, right? It's not feasible. But is there an instance? Do you know that a movie kind of inspired a real science? Kind of like reverse engineering, when it was something ridiculous in the scene, but then some scientists went hang on a second, is this possible? Can we prove this? Did that ever happen?
I guess that's my next backup Nerd Night talk, is how Star Trek and scientific innovation have had this, rotating relationship. That's at least my go-to example. There definitely are lots, right? Kids who grew up on whatever are going to try to, make that. So Star Trek is the main one I can think of. There's so many things in Star Trek that didn't exist until engineers who grew up on Star Trek, were starting to create things. So obviously your flip phones and things like that. But I mean, even, this is something I learned at some point, sliding doors. We didn't have automatic sliding doors before Star Trek. We did not, That was a thing because it was two people with a curtain on or whatever opening the doors on Star Trek, and people were like, oh shit, how are we gonna do that? And they figured out how to do that. We didn't have that before. Tablets, if you look at anything they're looking at with data on it, it's a fucking iPad, right? All of these things. So that's my main one, but I know that there's more. And I would love in 10 years if a kid who grew up loving Tokyo Drift, engineered something to